Holy City Center Radio. It is episode 164, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Friday, August 24th, 2023. South Carolina continues to lead from behind as the state has effectively banned all abortions. That's just the start of the show. And it's a tough place to start, but that's where we're going to be getting into. There's some other stories that I'll be updating you on as well, but obviously that's been the biggest news. Let me also address the big orange elephant in the room, which is that on Thursday evening, former President Donald Trump was supposed to be turning himself in and was expected to. I recorded this before that happened. And for those in the dark, he was supposed to turn himself into the Fulton County jail. I forget the official jail's name, but it's in Fulton County, Georgia, related to the efforts to overturn the election in Georgia, which was the most recent set of indictments we were talking about in the last episode. I know it's hard to keep track of all these things. He was scheduled to, barring something unforeseen happening that likely occurred. But if something wild happened, that is why we're not talking about it. I recorded the episode a Thursday afternoon, so that is why we will not be discussing that on this podcast. If there's anything worth noting, I will be sure to pass it along. If you've missed it, many of the other co-defendants have been turning themselves in. And unlike Trump's other indictments, they are planning on doing mugshots. And we have already seen mugshots from several of the co-conspirators, including Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York City, and one of Trump's lawyers, friends, whatever you want to call them. So that is why you will not have any more coverage than what I just mentioned. So again, if something wild happened, like he went on the lam, and it's like the Bronco chase, like O.J. Simpson in the early 90s, that is why I'm not talking about it. I don't foresee any of that occurring, but just want to put that caveat out there. All right, a couple things before we get into the news. Number one, if you're looking for something to do this weekend, as always, go to holycitycenter.com/events. You can find the events calendar there. It's actually not just the weekend. Anytime you're looking for plans, that is the best place to go. There's also a dedicated weekend events page, which is usually try to keep it right up at the top of the website throughout the weekend or close to it, so you can find that pretty easily as well. And I do have one update about life. Hooray! I've got a story to bore you with. No, I'm just kidding. It should be a good one because it's not so much about me as what I went and attended. So hopefully some of you will be interested in that. So on, I believe, Tuesday evening? Yeah, Tuesday. I went to the Riviera Theater with a friend of mine. First time I've been inside there, period, in any capacity. It's always been closed. I've never seen inside. And finally got tickets to an event there. I went to go see a comedy sketch group called Please Don't Destroy. If you've never heard of them, you still may know who they are. They are on Saturday Night Live. It's this group of three guys, and they do pre-recorded video sketches that appear just about every week, if not every week, on Saturday Night Live. And so I was interested. One, I wanted to see the Riviera. Two, this seemed like something different to do. I've never seen sketch comedy live. I've seen improv, I've seen stand-up, but never sketch. And I do enjoy their videos. They have some pretty popular ones, including one featuring Taylor Swift and Pete Davidson. And, I just thought it'd be something different. And so only bummer of the night was that for whatever reason, even though when you went to purchase tickets, it was showing the regular Riviera Theater seating, for some reason, the event was moved elsewhere within the property to what was essentially a conference room. So that was a little bizarre that they were selling tickets as if it was for the regular theater, but then they just had a makeshift, seating arrangement where they just had chairs. They covered the chairs with a black cloth and then had paper printed out saying where to sit. So that, if you bought tickets for this section, this row, here it is. So they tried to match their regular venue, but inside this conference room. Again, I don't know. I would be speculating as to why they did that. I would imagine maybe it has something to do with capacity. Maybe they didn't sell as many tickets as they thought. I don't know. But for some reason, I still haven't seen the actual inside of the theater proper. I did see, when you walk in the lobby area and, a hallway. But I didn't get to see the actual theater. So I was a little bummed about that, but I plan on going back for some other shows. So hopefully I'll finally be able to see it. And for those who don't know, the Riviera Theater, I think it was closed for over 40 years or something like that. But it's got that old school kind of light up marquee on the outside. It looks like, maybe it was an old movie theater. I'm actually not super familiar with the history, and shame on me for not doing my research before talking about it. But it's similar to the American Theater that I'm sure a lot of you have seen on King Street. A lot of people like to lay in the middle of the road by it because it's was the scene from The Notebook where the characters lay in the middle of the road was filmed there. So same idea where it's like this old venue, kind of looks like an old school movie theater. And so I was looking forward to it. So that was a little bit of a bummer, but thankfully the show itself was fine. It didn't suffer from being in, again, like I said, a glorified conference room. The crowd really seemed to enjoy it, and it was good. There was an opener. She was pretty funny as well. She didn't perform very long, though. Like, I think it was even less than 15 minutes, like less than a normal, when I go see stand-ups, if they have an opener, it's usually 15 minutes at least. Maybe 20 to 30 tops. But no, it was pretty quick, but she was still really funny. And then the three guys came out, and they did really well. Lots and lots of laugh out loud moments, real ones, not just texting LOL, like real laughing. And the crowd was super into it, and it was good. It was enjoyable. The funniest part was my friend stepped out to go to the bathroom, and our seats were right by the door that people were going in and out of, if they wanted to go buy drinks or snacks or go to the bathroom. And at one point when she left, they were doing a skit that included one of the guys coming in that door, which was like in the middle of the theater. And he was right next to me. The only thing between me and him was my friend's empty seat. And so part of me was like, oh, please do not make me part of this show. I do not want to be part of this. This is like my nightmare, like going to like a comedy show or really any show. And they're trying to like make someone be, hey, you be part of the show. Like, no, not interested. Please don't do that. Thankfully, that was not what was going on. However, my friend, when she came back after hesitating for a little while after seeing him right by her chair, she decided to go for it and try to like duck under the spotlight. And the guys on stage made a little joke about her that was, referenced in the sketch. It wouldn't make as much sense here right now, and I'm not going to get into it, but it was just a funny moment. So when I shared something on my Instagram story later on after the show, a couple of my friends who were also in attendance and I had run into in the lobby made some comment about my friend being part of the show. So that was pretty funny and embarrassing for her. So, it wasn't really that bad or embarrassing, but she, like me, wants nothing to do with being part of a show. It has a little bit of anxiety and did not want to be center of attention. So that's why I was shocked she went for it. But anyway, a funny little moment that made the night a little bit more enjoyable, or I should say more enjoyable than it already was. That made it seem like we weren't having fun. We were having a really good time. So it was fun. So, like I said, something different, and I'm glad we did it. Not sure I would necessarily go out of my way to see sketch comedy again unless it's a well-known group like these guys, because I have a feeling that, it might not be as fun, for people who are just getting going, because it's difficult to write anything funny, but especially multiple sketches and then sell tickets, make people pay to see you. That's tough. You got to make sure you're on your A game, and thankfully, they did a really great job. So that's what I've been up to. On the agenda, I am supposed to be checking out Lamar's Sporting Club after I record this podcast, which is a new venue on King Street. I hope to report back on that on Monday's episode. So stay tuned for that. But all right, enough about me. Let's get into the news. And I wish it was a better news day, but alas, anytime South Carolina politics is involved, it's usually not good news. On Wednesday morning, the all-male South Carolina Supreme Court reversed course from an earlier ruling granted from a slightly different version of this court and ruled that the state's abortion ban is constitutional. That's right, the South Carolina Supreme Court on Wednesday ruled that the latest version of the state's so-called Fetal Heartbeat and Protection from Abortion Act was constitutional and vacated the preliminary injunction that had been issued previously by a local circuit court. The law bans abortion in the state at around 6 weeks into a pregnancy, which, of course, as we've discussed before, is before most people even know they are pregnant. And that is now the law of the land here in South Carolina. Now, there are exceptions for the patient's life and health and for fatal fetal anomalies. There is also an exception, this one up to 12 weeks of the pregnancy in the case of rape or incest. Now, there are some caveats to that rape or incest exception. Yes, they have 12 weeks versus 6, but the doctor is required to report the crime, and the victim's contact information is required to be given to the area sheriff's office within 24 hours of the appointment. So that's the gist of it, and there's so much to talk about with this. I'll try to just hit the highlights in things, but yes, this is now the law in South Carolina, pending any legal challenges, which I don't see happening just because this was already a legal challenge, but who knows if someone finds something and try to challenge it. So now, just like that, the state Supreme Court kind of unexpectedly dropped this decision on Wednesday morning, and that's that. It is now law. Obviously, that has led to all sorts of hiccups and problems with people who had appointments. Now that they're past 6 weeks, appointments are being canceled, and it's just a big mess right now as people try to figure out what they're going to do, what they would do if a situation would arise, if they needed an abortion. And it's just a big mess right now for anybody who is involved, whether it's doctors, nurses, nonprofits, or people who are pregnant themselves. So yes, that's a whole mess, but obviously the mess is going to continue into the future. As we mentioned, 6 weeks into a pregnancy is before most people even know they're pregnant. And without getting too much into the biology and development and all that kind of stuff, that 6 weeks is kind of a misnomer anyway. But again, in reality, when we're talking about development and the reproductive cycle, and the 6 weeks isn't really even necessarily accurate. But putting that aside, even if it was, really is 6 weeks from conception, when you're actually able to say on day one, you could find out you're pregnant. That's what I'm saying. Like, say day one, you were able to figure it out. 6 weeks is not a lot of time. And now when you add in the fact that, you don't find out on day one, a lot of people don't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks, period, let alone, day one. They don't even know for that amount of time. You couple that with the fact that it's incredibly hard to get an appointment if you do want to seek an abortion. You're weeks out in some instances. And as I'm about to point out, there are many counties in the state that don't even have an OB-GYN in the county. So now you're talking about people from other places trying to travel to another county. So now you have even more people. It is a mess. It is a complete mess, and it is going to be so for a long, long time. Now, let's also touch on a couple things here. The bill's name is inaccurate. The law is inaccurate as far as the science. Not to be that guy, but I am 100% going to be that guy. It is called the fetal heartbeat. That's the first part of the bill, fetal heartbeat. First of all, before 6 weeks or before, not a fetus. It is an embryo. So that's already inaccurate. Heartbeat, also inaccurate medically. An embryo does not have a heartbeat. There are electrical impulses, electrical activity, I guess would be the better word, not impulses, electrical activity that can be detected in the embryo around 6 weeks. That is what they're calling the heartbeat. It's not actually a heartbeat. So it's already incorrect. It's not a fetus, and it does not actually have a heartbeat. It is electrical activity in an embryo. Now, over stages of development, I get it. Embryo becomes a fetus. When the fetus is out of the womb, it is now an infant. Obviously, I get that this all leads to an actual heart, an actual heartbeat, and an actual human being. But I'm just saying the wording and the law is inaccurate from a science standpoint. I don't know if there's any way to ask for an injunction or to challenge this law over that, but it's not medically accurate to begin with. Again, putting aside the 6 weeks thing isn't really, it's not really how long people will have. It's just, it is, as I've repeated a million times, it is a mess. It is not well thought out at all, and is going to lead to all sorts of complications, not just people having to carry a child the full term who didn't want to for whatever reason, which is none of our business, but also it will lead to the death of women. I mean, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but we've seen it in other states happen. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be this, ridiculously high number, but it's going to happen. And we've seen it in other states where doctors were afraid to do certain procedures. Even if they thought the mother's life or health was in danger, they had to wait to a certain level, like, okay, well, you're going to crash at some point within the next, few hours. But until that moment, I'm afraid to sign off, or I can't say that an abortion would save your life until we get to that point. It's ridiculous. And it needs to be at least fine-tuned, and there needs to be some clarification on things, at least. So that's where we're at in this state. One of the most extreme abortion bans in the state. And like I said, it effectively has eliminated abortions because of all of the different factors I've already talked about. So you might be wondering, hey, wait a minute, you said this is an all-male Supreme Court, and this is the latest version of this bill? Yes, if you don't remember, earlier this year, this Supreme Court, granted, the membership was a little different, but they found that the 2021 version of this bill was unconstitutional on the grounds that it violated a woman's constitutional right to privacy. In response to the decision, the South Carolina General Assembly, who just could not take the fact that they were told no on this, they went ahead and tried to make a new version of the law. There wasn't really any significant changes to it, but they still went ahead and made some minor changes and tried to pass it. It did pass, but immediately Planned Parenthood South Atlantic and 3 other medical providers filed an action in the circuit court seeking a declaration that the new law was unconstitutional. As soon as Henry McMaster signed that thing, bam, it was challenged. The circuit court granted an injunction pending the constitutional challenge. So what that meant is we reverted back to what has been the law of the land under Roe v. Wade until the South Carolina State Supreme Court made their decision. So in addition to the act being revised, again, minimally, nothing that I read or saw should have changed the initial ruling of the unconstitutionality of it on the right to privacy basis. But in addition to that, the makeup of the court changed. So in January, that's when the ruling happened. But after the ruling, one of the people who said, hey, no, this is unconstitutional, was Justice Kay Hearn. She retired, and a new justice, Gary Hill, was elected. Upon his election, it made South Carolina's Supreme Court the only all-male court in the country. There is no other state that has all men on the court, and there's none that have all women on the court. Every single court in this country has at least one woman and one man on it. We are the only one, all male. And all of them decided, hey, yeah, I know that when that other justice was here, we decided that this was unconstitutional, and there really isn't much that's changed. But because technically they did change the bill, this is a new act, a new law, and so we can revisit it. And no, it's cool now. It's constitutional. I mean, just insane. Henry McMaster, the governor here, got his way. He's been pushing for this. I mean, he actually wanted an abortion ban from the moment of conception, but he settled for this. But again, it's basically what he wanted, given the circumstances. It's just insane that something that was already decided by the state Supreme Court, and not like generations ago or years ago, it was January of this year. You make a minor change to a law. Technically, it's a different law, and it can be looked at again. And the only reason it becomes constitutional this time around is because the one woman on the court retired, and they threw in a conservative, anti-choice judge. And just like our Supreme Court on the national level has completely overreached their authority, overturned decades of precedent, and basically made a ruling not because of the law, but because of their own beliefs about what they think the law should be. It's a tell when the law was already ruled unconstitutional. And then they turn around a few months later and say, nah, never mind, it's constitutional. I mean, you don't have to, it's not a stretch. Not much changed in the legislation that was deemed unconstitutional to this one. It's the same thing. And it doesn't matter because they obviously get away with it. They already have. It's insane. So first of all, I am sorry to anyone out there listening who this affects. Anyone who can get pregnant, anyone who works at an OB-GYN or worked for Planned Parenthood, and I know those folks were already getting hate, and threats and stuff prior to this. It's going to be tough for a lot of people, and I feel badly, and I'm sorry for that. And I'm not sure what the next step is. There are some organizations like the Carolina Abortion Fund who will still help people as best as they can. If you become pregnant and you want to know all of your options, including what it would take to get an abortion, you could reach out to an organization like them. You can still reach out to Planned Parenthood. You can still reach out to OB-GYNs. They just can't break the law, but they can absolutely inform you of what is available to you here in the state and at what point, and they can also direct you somewhere else. So keep that in mind. There are still people who can provide you with information, including information about abortion, that you're still allowed to talk about it, as are your doctors. It just can't be performed after 6 weeks or 12, given the circumstances. So a sad day. It would be, I feel like it didn't hit as hard as I expected, because I feel like a lot of people here knew it was coming. And also we've dealt with this twice now, because prior to this, the first was the initial law being passed. A lot of shock and disappointment, becomes unconstitutional, celebration, hooray, they get back to work, they pass it again, a little bit of shock and fright. Oh, is this going to go through? And now it officially has. So it feels like we've been dealing with this all year, because we have been. And it's really not just disappointing. It is not shocking either. Sadly, this was kind of expected, even though it defies logic how we got to this point. But I'm sure we'll talk about it more going forward. But certainly a sad day. As usual, South Carolina leading from behind in this nation, and just happy to bring us back into the past. Kind of as a caveat to that story, just real quick, I alluded to it when I was talking in that last story about the lack of OB-GYNs in the state, which is a problem regardless of abortion, that there's got to be thousands, considering how many counties there are, thousands of women, thousands of people who, for whatever reason, would need services from an OB-GYN, whether it's a standard appointment, something more serious, whatever it is. They have to travel very far to see an OB-GYN specialist. And that's already unacceptable, but now it's going to be even worse, because the time frame that people seeking an abortion or needing information, they're going to try to set appointments, and these places are already booked weeks out because of this shortage. But here's the official total as of last year. So the data's a year old. There may be some minor changes here, but the Post and Courier looked into this, and they found that out of South Carolina's 46 counties, there were 14 counties that had no practicing OB-GYN doctor. Ridiculous. I know that's less than half, but 14 counties in this state don't have a single OB-GYN doctor. It doesn't stop there, though. There are 5 other counties, and all of them are rural counties: Cherokee, Jasper, Marion, Newberry, and Union, that each have just one OB-GYN in their entire county. So that's 14 with none. And then we have 5 that only have one. And then Berkeley County, there is just one OB-GYN doctor with a primary practice, but 6 others with a secondary site there. So that's what I was talking about, where this is going to complicate things more. And it's not just abortions. Anybody who, especially in those counties, who they're going to have to go to another county to get appointments, which is then going to create longer waits in other counties, which means people who need any kind of service related to OB-GYN are going to have to wait long periods of time to get an appointment. This is going to make things worse for everyone. Imagine there's someone who needs an appointment, has nothing to do with abortion, but is something else, whatever it may be, and that delay of when they realize they need to go see a doctor and when they can actually get in could be costly on many levels. So, like I said, it's just going to get worse because of this ruling. And there doesn't seem to be any change that's coming. So, we're not expecting a bunch of OB-GYN facilities to pop up, especially now that we have one of the most extreme and restrictive abortion bans in the country. Who would want to come here, and be demonized as some doctors have been? And now you're going to go somewhere where your practice is extremely limited in certain capacities. So just wanted to kind of put a button on that where I referenced it in the first story, and those are the specifics. Again, there may be some minor changes over the last year, but it shouldn't have drastically changed by any capacity. So just wanted to get you that information, just because the story wasn't bad enough as it was. All right, couple more updates real quick here. Michael Burham, that man who you may remember led police on a chase, or a manhunt, I guess would be the more appropriate term, when they found him hiding in the woods. They arrested him, and then he escaped from his jail. He is going to face charges, assuming he doesn't escape again. So this all started back in May. You may remember Burham allegedly kidnapped a couple in their home and forced them to ride all the way here to Charleston. He was on the run for murder charges at the time in a nearby New York community. So murder charges in New York, kidnaps a couple, forces them to drive all the way to Charleston for whatever reason. And then after a multi-state manhunt that lasted several days, authorities arrested him in South Carolina, as I mentioned, and then brought him to Pennsylvania, where he was facing charges there. And then last month, he allegedly used multiple bed sheets that were braided together to escape from jail, which led to another manhunt. This one lasted 9 days before he was apprehended again. Now a judge says he'll face separate trials for the kidnapping and breaking out of jail. That is in addition to the rape and arson charges he's facing in New York. So obviously his original charges were serious on their own, but now he has added kidnapping, also very serious, and breaking out of jail, which is serious as well. Assuming this guy doesn't break out again, he has got a lot of charges and is staring down a lot of jail time in his future, assuming, of course, he is found guilty. A truck driver from Georgia has been indicted on several child exploitation charges and may have victims across the Southeast. This is according to federal officials. They sent out a press release on Tuesday. By they, I'm talking about the U.S. Department of Justice. And they say that 48-year-old Todd Eric Sisk of Baxley, Georgia, is in custody after a grand jury indicted him on charges that included attempted production of child sexual abuse pornography, distribution of child pornography, and possession of child pornography. Now, I will say, I'm using that term. That's not really the appropriate term anymore. I think those are the official names of the law, and that's why you're seeing and hearing me say that, because that's technically the rule. But the people now prefer, and it makes sense, that it's called like child sexual abuse material. By adding pornography to the title, it makes it seem, because porn itself isn't illegal. So I know it's a semantics thing. It's one of those, terminology changes over time as we think about the words we use. So I just wanted to note that. I know that's not really what a lot of people think we should call that anymore. But I just wanted to call that out. So in any event, this person has been arrested, and the Department of Justice says that there may be people in the Charleston area, South Carolina, that may have been victims of his. They just don't know. He worked as a truck driver with regular routes from Atlanta to Charleston, with occasional stops in Tennessee and Alabama as well. He previously lived in Ohio and in multiple locations in Florida and Georgia. So investigators want to hear from anyone who may have come in contact with Sisk. If you did, you can call the HSI tip line at 866-347-2423. So no indication that he for sure committed any crimes in Charleston or South Carolina, but he very well could have, based on his history and what he has, alleged history, as I always need to say in these circumstances. So if you think you had contact with him or know someone who did, call that number. There's a link in the show notes where you can see a picture of him and get some more details in case you're unsure. All right, not a fun day for the show. I get that, and I apologize. So let's talk about something fun before we sign off here, and that is the opening of a new restaurant. And it's from a James Beard Award nominated chef. So that's good news. You know what I'm saying? Let's go down this route instead. That's right. As I mentioned, James Beard Award nominated chef. His name is Kevin Johnson. He and his wife Susan are opening a new restaurant. If you recognize their names, that is because they opened the popular restaurant called The Grocery in downtown Charleston in 2011. And this week they announced the official opening of their second concept, Lola Rose. Officially, they opened their doors on Tuesday, the 22nd. You can find them at 3540 Park Avenue Boulevard in Mount Pleasant. That is located at The Bend in Carolina Park. Lola Rose is going to feature a menu of coastal Mediterranean cuisine and cocktails, and what they say will be a relaxed setting. So you can go check out a new restaurant. I would imagine it's going to be good. As I mentioned, The Grocery is beloved down here and has earned Chef Johnson a James Beard Award nomination. So I wouldn't expect, anything less with this new concept. But I haven't gotten over there, but it sounds good and I'm looking forward to it. So if you check it out, let me know. And that'll do it for this Friday edition of Holy City Sinner Radio. I hope you have a great weekend. Remember, go to holycitycenter.com/events to find stuff going on. And also, while you're thinking about things to do, you're hopping on the internet, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already? That ensures that you don't miss any episodes, as well as helps, maybe help other people find this nice little podcast I got going on here. You can also support Holy City Center by going to patreon.com/holycitycenter or holycitycenter.com/shop, where you can pick up some merchandise. Enjoy your weekend. Stay cool out there. I'm sure it's going to be hot again. Stay safe. Find something enjoyable to do. And let's not think about Monday till we have to. But I will talk to you on Monday. Until then, good night and good luck.